Good evening and welcome to the forum. It's great to see so many people here. Thanks for coming. I am the understudy, so those of you who counted on Bruce introducing our speaker, I assure you he'll be back next week. What you may not know is that your dedicated volunteer forum committee spends 95% of their waking hours putting together the slate of speakers for next year. So if there's anybody in your sphere who is a deep expert in a subject that will be of interest to the island and happens to be a superb speaker, please let any of the forum committee know and we will give it our sincerest consideration. And last year when we decided to put artificial intelligence in the program, we had no idea how much it was going to explode in the last year. So this evening we have an expert, and our former chair, Gail Jackson, will introduce.
Good evening, and thank you, Martin. I think for an understudy, you did damn well. Some of you were in the virtual audience in the first COVID summer of 2020 when our speaker via Zoom was David Green, widely acclaimed as the highly effective president of Colby College. Among other Colby initiatives he described was the college's brand spanking new Davis Artificial Intelligence Institute. At the time, it was in an embryonic stage. Tonight, 6 years later, we have the privilege to hear from the director of that institute what Colby College is actually doing to help its students become literate in AI. With AI's dizzying, lightning speed advances, coupled with, let's be candid, worrisome ethical concerns as well. What you should know about David Watts, our speaker today, in advance, is that he was in the midst of a highly challenging and productive career at IBM, where he was vice president, leading R&D and business strategy when he was drawn to leave the private sector for higher education. After 20 years in business, he brought technical depth and a strategic mindset. Under his leadership, Colby's AI Institute, which was funded with a $30 million gift from the person after whom it's named, Davis. He was recently, under his leadership, the AI Institute was recently named one of the, quote, 15 colleges best preparing students for the AI economy by an organization called Ivy Wise. It's time to hear directly from David Watts, and so it's my pleasure to ask him to come to the podium to tell us about his mission and vision for the AI Institute. David.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Gail, and thank you to the Islesboro committee. Thanks to all of you for coming. And thanks for the round-trip ticket on the ferry, which the second half of which I won't be able to use, I think. So actually, I'll share this if you don't mind. Gail said to me that, well, you may be able to then swim over to the island one day. And I was interested because I've done triathlons, and I thought with open water swims, and that might be interesting. And then she said, but you might have to watch out for, dolphins and seals and maybe the occasional shark. I don't know if it's blue shark or the great white. Maybe I'll throw in some, is it lion's mane jellyfish? Yeah, so those could be out there. And of course, turbulent currents, which I'll have to watch out for. So maybe I won't do it that way. I mean, might let the return ticket go. But why am I here? And in fact, when Gail first approached me through David Green, who, as you heard, was the president of Colby College, I didn't agree right away, did I? And I first wanted to learn about the Islesboro Forum, and so Gail told me about a community from lobstermen to CEO, and I won't do it justice, but you know, what I loved about it was that you're bringing together speakers from, and you just gave me a great example, which terrified me because I have to follow some of the speakers' examples you gave, but across a broad range of topics. And you said from, I'll look them up right now. So you had sciences, economics, public policy, the arts, education, the environment, foreign policy, and others. And I was drawn to that. And the reason is I value a community with an interdisciplinary, collaborative spirit. And forums like this enable that. And you'll hear a little bit more about sort of what drew me to come to Colby in the first place. So, you know, I think one of the things I was drawn to, and being here reminds me of when I was a teenager in Chautauqua. Have any of you heard of Chautauqua, New York? The Chautauqua Institution? A few hands going up. We actually lived there off of Chautauqua Lake year-round, and my family would work during the year, not for pay, but part-time, and we would get payment in a pass, a summer pass, to be able to go in and out of the institute. And what I loved about it is it was an institute that's founded in music. My grandmother is the one who sort of started going there, and she went to Eastman School of Music and then taught at Eastman School of Music. My mother went to Oberlin for the conservatory there. And but what was amazing about this community was it didn't just stay with music, right? It started doing similar to what you're doing now, right? Which was growing and bring the arts and the humanities and even sciences and social sciences to the Institute and sharing knowledge across all of those disciplines. And, you know, in fact, some of you may have heard of Salman Rushdie. Yeah, it was at Chautauqua that he was stabbed for the power of his words, right? And so it was kind of shocking to me to see it was the same amphitheater that I sat at listening to concerts and hearing speakers and being inspired by speakers at Chautauqua, New York. So I think that might be part of why I was drawn to this after your description of this. Because I think I'm drawn to communities that believe in bringing together those diverse minds and cultures and experiences. Because I think that's how we navigate those turbulent currents, okay? And make no mistake, I think we're in turbulent currents today. And some of you actually said you're terrified with respect to AI, and I think there are real reasons for that. AI has dominated the global conversation, right? We hear almost daily of AI transforming everything from healthcare to law to manufacturing to media. We're inundated, I think, with both ends of what I'll call the spectrum, right? Where we hear the great breakthroughs and incredible promise and overpromise of AI at the same time as we're hearing the pitfalls, right? Some of the dangers and challenges and issues associated with AI for the media. And so it can be a confusing time. And as Gail mentioned, I'm now director of the Davis Institute for Artificial Intelligence, which was the first such institute at a liberal arts college. But as you heard, I didn't spend my career in the ivory towers, right? Before I came to Colby, as you heard. I was a second-level vice president at IBM, which IBM has 3 levels of VP before you get to the CEO. I was in R&D, and before that I was a VP of business strategy for the infrastructure business unit at IBM. I was serving in my 4th year on the CEO's leadership team, which he called the activation team, and I'd recently been given my 5th promotion at IBM to that VP, second-level VP position, and so I think my career was going well. So perhaps to understand sort of why I'm here, we should understand why I chose to leave that, right? And it has to do with some of the challenges and concerns that I think a lot of people are feeling now. But to really answer that question, I need to get some context, and I'll give you a quick sidebar on context. Context, it will be much, much easier for me to give you context than most developers can do, brilliant minds, for AI tools. And that's one of the challenges with AI, is that some of the things that are easy for us as humans are incredibly difficult for AI. And the reverse is also true, right? There are things that AI tools can do that are very challenging for us, or would take us incredibly inordinate amount of time to do, that a lot of AI tools can do more easily. So to give you this context, I think I have to go back to that teenage boy who was sitting in Chautauqua, who then went on to Carleton College, which is very similar to Colby. So I don't know if has anyone heard of Carleton? Wow, great, some great hands. Yeah, Carleton is known for, so liberal arts colleges are known for focusing on teaching and interdisciplinary teaching, okay? And Carleton is known for being the top liberal arts college for teaching, okay? So that's where I did my undergraduate education, and I wasn't, I think I took it for granted when I was there. And I went on from there to Cal Berkeley, which probably a number of you have heard of. I saw some fist bumps. Go Bears. But Cal is a research powerhouse, right? And I immediately noticed the difference, a significant difference in going from Colby to Cal. Where one focus, one is both higher level institutions, but one focused on interdisciplinary teaching with some research, right? And the other focused, I'd say, heavily on research with some teaching. Literally, that was how it was approached by most of the professors there, right? And I think that distinction is important in how we're preparing students for the era that we're in, right? After my PhD, I began my career as an engineer at Motorola's Advanced Products Research and Development Labs, where within my first year I contributed innovation that ultimately got licensed by Motorola, bringing in millions of dollars, which I saw none of. And I went on to join a startup in Silicon Valley, which was successful. And for a startup to be successful, from a business perspective, there are two ways, right? You can either go IPO or become acquired. So this one was acquired. It was a successful startup. I went on, and then after that, I actually left Silicon Valley and went to IBM, and that's where I had this career, decades-long career at IBM. But I think during my decades at IBM, I observed, I think, a troubling pattern, which was I worked with brilliant highly trained developers with incredible technical fluency who were great in a moment, but then would struggle to adapt when the technology shifted underneath their feet. And I saw this in multiple places, and I think, it's perhaps easier to see that with startups, right, where I was, right? Most people can see that in a startup, I think one of the critical ingredients to a successful startup is the ability to adapt, right? You have to. You start in one direction, things change on you, you have to then sort of pivot, and so most successful startups, right, the majority of them, I think, do adapt and pivot, and the majority of startups actually don't make it, right, because of an inability to adapt. So, but I think you can also see it in large companies like where I was, at Motorola or at IBM, right, and I don't know if anyone is, can remember a project called Iridium by Motorola. Yeah, it was going to revolutionize the mobile technology. This was happening while I was there, and needless to say, it didn't, right? Another good example, I'll give one from IBM. IBM was going to go into health. This is an AI example, into AI in healthcare, and it failed. And I think common to all, whether it's the startups that don't make it or the large, heavily invested projects that fail at larger companies, I think common to all of those is an inability to adapt. Okay, so I think the question is, why does that happen? And I believe it happens because the majority of our educational pipeline funnels our brightest minds into narrow, rigid, technical silos, deep expertise. They're taught to build and optimize rather than maybe interrogate and build an ability to move into uncomfortable spaces and an ability to adapt. So hopefully that's giving you some context. And I think what we're seeing is an acceleration of technology. I just had a speaker at Colby that I invited, Catherine Gorini, who worked with me at IBM. She actually gave a lot of data on how much technology has advanced and how rapidly it's advancing. So compare, say, how long it took electricity to get to a certain stage, and I won't quote it right, but it was, let's call it, 25% adoption. And it took decades. And then she went to different technologies, the internet, right? And then what we're seeing with AI now is that it's taking days, right? And so with that rapid change, the dynamic nature of, that we're in with technology, I think we need an ability to adapt. And really, I was watching engineers and developers. I had 2,000-something developers on my team struggle to adapt, right, to AI that their own company was building, okay? Struggle to adapt, to use it in ways to change, right? Struggled with some of the risks associated with what they were building, but then having an inability to mitigate those risks. And I think I was watching this challenge, and I had sort of felt it since my days at Carleton. And I kind of felt like if I looked at myself, my own ability to adapt whether it was, for startups, whether it was for innovation at a large company or innovation at startups. I attributed as much to, or perhaps more to, that interdisciplinary educational foundation I had at say, Carleton, than the deep technical knowledge I had, whether it's in graduate school or beyond. So I actually, in my interview for the job, so Davis AI, as you heard, David Green came and talked about it soon after he got the funding. It hadn't been manifested yet. It had an inaugural director. That director left, and that created an opening for me to step in. And during my interview with David Green, I actually said to him that the interdisciplinary approach to education that comes as part of a liberal arts education, but can come in other ways as well, is the superpower that's critical in this age of disruption, right? And I think it's needed now more than ever. So really now, we're working towards a shift to what I call a full spectrum approach to education in the AI era. And it's a shift away from the pull that tech companies like IBM and Google and others have for, I'd say, for specialized but therefore siloed skills. And therefore that educational institutions have, so there's a pull for these siloed technical skills, and there's a push, a supply of these skills. And I think we need to move a little bit away from that. That's a provocative statement, right? Because we've been doing it the way we've been doing it for decades, maybe centuries. So what do I mean by that, right? I think let's look at some of the data of what's happening. And if Colby was recently featured in a Fortune magazine article on AI. And I can provide it to you through Gail, or if you Google Fortune and AI and Colby, or my name, if you need it to be more specific, you should be able to find it. But in that article, it was talking about the decline of CS enrollment. And I'll give you the numbers. In spring of 2026, CS enrollment had declined by 8.4% compared to the year before. And the year before that, it had declined by 3.6%. So it was declining, and not only that, it was accelerating. And why is that significant is that CS enrollment had been increasing every year for over 10 years, right? So that was a pretty significant finding. And the question was, why is that happening? And my response, so that's what the interviewer was trying to figure out and write an article about. And my response was really, it's not that students are losing interest in technology. I think what it means is that students are realizing that the value lies in combining technical fluency with other areas of interest. And at Colby, CS enrollment has followed that trend, right? It's declining. Oh, computer science, I'm sorry. Apologies. Thank you for asking. So when I say CS, I'm talking about the computer science department, which I've now been in academia a whole 1 year, and I'm already using that lingo, so apologies. So computer science enrollment, so the enrollment in the computer science majors at Colby and institutions across the nation is what has been declining. And so the point I made to the reporter was that it wasn't an indication of a lack of interest in technology, not even a lack of interest in computer science, but more of a recognition that we need not just technical fluency, but we need expertise in specific areas that we can bring to bear on technology, or the other way around, okay? And so a good example would be, at Colby, would be the psychology department. And I just talked to Vera Romero. She told me the psychology enrollment is actually growing. And at Colby, psychology professors work with Davis AI and the computer science department, as well as, of course, the students, to look at challenging topics like AI assistance in mental health. And Colby was recently part of a grant, an NSF grant, where the Davis Institute initiated our involvement in it, and Colby was the only undergraduate institute that was part of what the NSF now calls an institute. And this was something called the ARIA Institute, and ARIA stands for AI research in the interaction of AI assistance. And the goal of that project is to look at mental and behavioral health. And you've probably seen when we talk about pitfalls and some of the news that you've heard of using AI tools by people with mental challenges that ultimately end up committing suicide, right? And that's because of context, okay? And so it's one of the most complex areas, and there are multiple like this that you can point to, that really require a broader perspective, right, as we look at these tools. Colby was working with, and so I went out to the kickoff at Brown University for this. It started in October of last year, and it was with people like Cal Berkeley, Dartmouth, Carnegie Mellon, Princeton, Brown, NYU, the Santa Fe Research Institute, which looks at a lot of complex systems in general, and the University of New Mexico there as well. But I think this type of research is exemplary of what is needed as we look to the future of education. And the way I say it at Colby is we're enabling what I call X plus AI, right? And I deliberately put the X first, right? Because the goal is how do we bring AI together with X and to solve these complex challenges. And it requires, and X can be any discipline, it can be multiple disciplines, but what's that area of interest, right, that we're bringing AI to actually solve real world problems for. And it's not about bolting AI onto a discipline. It's about how do we establish co-creation across disciplines with free-flowing engagement across disciplinary boundaries. Because I think if you want to create solutions for some of these complex problems that is not just in mental and behavioral health, but across the breadth of the challenges that we're seeing today, it's not just about how do we make larger and larger training data for AI models, But it's about how do we bring diverse thoughts, ideas, creative ideas together in teams to bring context to every phase of the development cycle, from concept to manufacturing and into the field to launch. I think that's going to be critical, and that was a big part of my motivation to make the jump. So Gail has said I should talk a little bit about what AI has been doing since David Green came. And when AI burst on the scene, when David Green was here, soon thereafter, I think a lot of universities and colleges rushed to actually ban AI on campuses. At Colby, we actually worked to enable access to all students, to faculty and administration, which was controversial. And we architected a solution we call Mule Chat. So the Colby mascot is a mule. And the goal of Mule Chat was that it'll enable access to the frontier models, the LLM models, some of which I think Jeff was talking about while we were setting up at the beginning about some of the models he's using, like Claude and ChatGPT. And Gemini is another frontier model. But we also architected in a way that we could use some of the open weight models. And again, to enable access for students to work on things, whether it's through these frontier models use, say, cloud-based, where these models then reach out into what's called the cloud. It's not that vague. The cloud are huge data farms. So you've probably heard about some of these large data centers that are going up in support of AI, and some of the challenges associated with energy and water, and the challenges with the communities that they're landing in. But there are also open weight models that you can bring locally on site, which solves a lot of these problems, but doesn't give you as much access to these bigger, badder, data that a lot of the frontier companies believe is required in order to advance the capability of AI. And there's some truth to that. But I also believe there's truth to how do we optimize the actual tools we need with smaller models, for example, local, solving a lot of sort of the energy concerns, privacy concerns, that can perform as well in what you need it to perform in as some of these larger models. So we've enabled that capability at Colby, which I think is helping students and faculty build tools that they can use locally. One example of that is the EchoBot. I actually like this one. Davis AI students built a interactive chatbot that we could use to query, that anyone in the Colby community could use to query the Colby Echo, which is the school newspaper, which of course goes back to many decades. That you can now have these archives that normally you wouldn't have access to because it's not as easy to engage with. You can now query in a natural way and engage with these archives and use them in whatever projects you're doing, in historical projects, et cetera. So that's just one example of them. And there are several others that are ongoing, which I think sort of are helping students then dive in, regardless of what discipline they come from. The other thing we did was institute a lot of what we call the Mule Chat training sessions that were, again, across campus. I mean, instituted not only Davis AI to faculty and students, but also peer-to-peer, where students were training other students. And I think it created an environment where students could freely interact with the tools and sort of understand them and learn the challenges and learn the pitfalls, all at the same time. And I think that has been a highly successful approach to how we go about this. And I think it has demystified a little bit some of these tools for a lot of the students, regardless of whether you're in art or social sciences or the humanities or writing and so I think that's an important aspect to this interdisciplinary approach. This summer, and the Fortune article that came out a few days ago talks about this program because it just completed. We launched something called the Davis AI Interdisciplinary Summer Bridges Program. And it was run in collaboration with another institute at Colby called the Halloran Lab for Entrepreneurship. And we brought a little over 30 students to campus, but they represented not just Colby students, they were the majority, but we also brought from 6 different higher education institutes. And it was sort of one local, one regional, one national, one international. And it was open to all years. So we had applicants who were freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and we even brought a couple of graduate students to the program, which I guess was ambitious, but because it was an experiment. We threw all of these, and across 23 different majors for a little over 30 students. Threw them together to learn the fundamentals of AI. We brought not only Professor Oliver Layton, for example, who is an expert in AI and does some tremendous research in AI spatial recognition models to teach the fundamentals, but we also brought Professor Stacy Dorr, who's a renowned expert in responsible computing and does a lot and gives talks internationally on AI ethics. And we had them in the phase 1, it was an 8-week program, and in phase 1, while they're learning the fundamentals, at the same time learning about the pitfalls and the challenges, which I think sometimes is sort of put as on the back burner, and maybe you learn the fundamentals, learn about the possibilities, and then talk about AI ethics. So I think that the goal was how do we do that from the start, and then bring these interdisciplinary students to bear, and then have them actually innovate and try things and build things, and then through the Halloran Lab for Entrepreneurship in phase 2 of the program, actually start to apply what they're building and turn them into actual solutions. And by the end of the 8 weeks, they pitched, and actually Catherine Guarini was one of the evaluators. We also had the Dirigo Labs. I was talking to Gail about the revitalization of downtown Waterville that Colby has been part of, and Dirigo Labs in Waterville has been driving a lot of entrepreneurship and business development in Waterville. That was part of the evaluators and the director of the Halloran Lab, et cetera. And so they actually had to pitch their ideas, and I think I can safely say the experiment worked. We had 7 different projects. These students, not only during the program, we brought in multiple experts, eight different experts across industry and academia to talk to the students about different real-life applications. But we also had them go around Maine. So we took excursions to Jackson Laboratories to the Mount Desert Island biological laboratories to University of Maine has a VEMI Institute, Technology Institute, that VEMI Labs that they also visited and engaged with technology there. They went to the Rue Institute and spent a day with a number of experts, including entrepreneurs and graduate students at the Rue Institute. So they got to experience sort of locally a lot of what's going on in the real world, where people talked about AI, and again, it was not just AI applications, the potential, like the marketing on one end of the spectrum, but they also talked about the challenges associated with it. What are the potential pitfalls that you can have as you try to introduce AI into healthcare, into different law, into different practices. So the students learned about these things and then found real-world problems to work on that they then presented the solutions they came up with. And the teams that were formed and where they were formed was actually on Colby has an island campus, the Allen and Brenner Islands. Have you guys heard of them? They were the Wyeth Islands. So these islands were curated by Betsy Wyeth for her husband, Andrew Wyeth, who was probably one of the best-known artists in the 20th century, American artists in the 20th century. And he was inspired by a lot of the landscape, which is what was her goal. These islands, Colby ended up purchasing these islands, so they could call them the Islands Campus. And so the students were able to go there in between phase 1 and phase 2 for the beginning and creation of their ideas, right? So I know this group can picture that, right? These students on, in the salty air as the waves crash against the main, coastline, thinking about real world problems and being inspired by their environment. And we've done that, even at Colby, Davis AI professor Tahia Chowdhury had gone to the same islands with students, been inspired by it, and came up with an AI research project with the students that was designed to use, her specialty is computer vision, and it was designed to use computer vision to look at debris in the oceans and identify debris in the oceans using AI. And it was interesting. A while ago, I volunteered to go do a cleanup on the island, and I ran into one of Tahia Chowdhury's students who had also volunteered to do the cleanup. So picture that, and he's actually picking up the debris that his AI models were identifying, right? And I don't know, there's something magical about that human aspect of doing the manual garbage cleanup, right? While working on the models to improve that, right? And that's kind of, to me, the magic, right? When we find ways for how humans, in a human-centered way, can work with these AI models. So maybe I'll close with this. As we look to the future of education, I'll open it up for questions. I think we're at a critical inflection point. I think the choices we make today will determine what the global workforce of tomorrow will achieve. And I think this full spectrum approach to education in the AI era is a critical component of how we do that. Because I think if we reside on one end of the spectrum and build technologies, who are excited about the possibilities, but in siloed ways are rigid. They focus on optimizing and performance and making the tools bigger and better in their ways. Will continue to create that rigid workforce that is challenged to adapt if you're on one end of the spectrum, I think. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum, and I see this as well within our students, and they treat it almost binary, right? You're either AI is terrible because of this, that, and the other, and I can give you a laundry list of those, or AI is this incredible potential, it's going to do this, and here's what I'm working on, and it's going to create this great thing in the future. And I think if we do one or the other of those, if we do the other end of that spectrum, I think we can create wonderful critical thinkers, but who are powerless to actually change the nature of what we're building, right? In a way, the tools that are in their lives, and make no mistakes, they're going to be in their lives. So I think what we want to focus on, neither of those scenarios are acceptable, right? I think as we did in phase one of that program, we need to fold those two ends of the spectrum in on themselves and address both of them at the same time. So typically what I'll do when a student comes to me and he's excited about AI, because I'm the director of AI, and he wants to tell me about the cool thing he's building, I'll bring up things from the other end of the spectrum that have you thought about this, right? And when another student comes to me saying why AI is bad, I'll bring up the other end of the spectrum to her and say, have you thought about these aspects? And I think the magic happens when you bring those two things together. And that's why I started with the interdisciplinary approach that you're taking here. I think has a power when you start to put that together to actually be the change that we want. I have said, and others have said, that AI it can be a mirror, right? Because think of the biases and things that are reflected back at us. And it'll reflect all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly of humanity. In order to make that mirror reflect back the way we want it to, I think we need this interdisciplinary approach, and I think together we can do that. And that way, when we look into the AI mirror, we see a better reflection of ourselves that reflect the creativity of humanity, the courage of humanity, and all that is good in humanity. This is the vision we're championing at Colby, and that's really why I'm here. And this is the vision that I hope each of you, and perhaps more importantly, you as a community, will take back with that. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you. All right, I think you had your hand up first, yeah?
Thank you for your talk tonight. I was an educator, and I remember being at the beginning of the laptop revolution in the state of Maine, and how we didn't really know how to use laptops, and we had to discover, and students finally surpassed their teachers in how to use laptops.
Yeah.
I think AI must be the same right now, in that we have to have critical thinking skills, be able to think outside the box.
Yes.
And I don't see education right now as teaching those kind of things. So if you had the ear of the Department of Education here in the state of Maine and in other states, what would you be saying to the people that are tasked with coming up with the education for their states, to say, this is what we are looking for at Colby and maybe other places that are really at the beginning of AI and how to apply it ethically to our country and worldwide. What are you looking for in students that come to Colby, and what would you ask for if you had that ability to wish in front of the Department of Education?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for the question. So I think one of the approaches that we took at Davis AI was students are our primary concern, but we actually started with faculty. We actually started a lot of the education with our faculty, and that's because I think a point that you made, which is students are coming in with their own ideas and their own, and if the faculty stay where they are, right, students surpass them in technical fluency, right? But then the faculty have an inability then to help them with how they marry that with ways to apply things responsibly. And it's not just about ethics, right? When you apply things responsibly, you build things that last. Okay, I mean, one of the great things about IBM is it's been around for over a century, right? And so they care about that, right? And so they want to build things that last, right? So some of the successes I've had have been, how do you build things to put them out into the world with a very demanding clientele, by the way, right? So the products I was building were going into, enterprise banks and large companies that are regulated and therefore have huge demand. So you want to build things that last. And so coming back to your question, I would ask for any help we can get in building the faculty up in terms of their own fluency, their own understanding of that full spectrum. Because remember, faculty sit at different ends of that spectrum as well, right? And so having them recognize how do we bring that together, which means that regardless of where you are on that, you got to look at the entire spectrum, and therefore you'll be better able to serve your students. So to me, that would be one of the most important, if I had one thing to wish for.
So, given the explosion in the cost of higher education and the amount of attention paid to the sort of class aspect of education, obviously you made the choice yourself to move from a for-profit business into education.
Yeah.
But is that the best alternative for spreading the gospel of the enormous power of AI? And are there other models that we can follow that aren't so exclusive to the very rich and the few who have access?
Very, very good question, right? If you think about Colby, one of their success metrics is, we got this many applicants, right? Even more. So therefore, the percentage of people you accepted actually went down, and that's a good thing, right? And to your question, that's not necessarily a good thing if you just look at Colby, right? So the question then is, one question is, how do we create access that's broader? And then your other part of your question was around cost, which I think one thing we should be careful about doing is cost is something that I think needs to be addressed on multiple fronts. And I think trying to find a silver bullet answer like, I can just use these AI models that will create mass learning and I will create my own curriculum. And I think you miss out on that people aspect that I talked about that I think is critical to how do we build the right solutions in the future. So I think being careful about saying AI is the answer to cost is one caution I will give. And I think we want to address the cost problem, and I do believe it is a problem. Colby's actually pretty good about it. They have a hierarchical sort of cost depending on your income, right? That they allow from financial aid perspective. but we can do so much more, and finding those solutions to enabling the cost of education to come down goes well beyond AI. That said, there may be ways that we can use AI to help that problem as well, right? How do we use AI to enable great access to beyond the walls of Colby, right? One of the things I do when I bring in speakers into Colby, I try to record and stream to some of the community that can go in. Are there ways to capture some of that education and use that as a way to reach broader perspectives? But again, not as a replacement for the human interaction that's required, right? And so that's the caution I'll give as I answer your question. And I think you had your hand up first.
I applaud the interdisciplinary approach. Couldn't agree more. I was interested in the trend that you talked about, that engineering or computer science majors are declining.
Yeah.
It's also true, from what I've read, that humanities departments are shrinking all over the country. And it's in those departments that you're going to find the critical thinkers, the ethical thinkers, the people who are going to be taking diverse perspectives and looking at the technology. So how are we going to meet that challenge, number one? And number two is, there's a real sense of urgency here. I mean, in the broader political world, things are just going by leaps and bounds. I wish your students would be graduating much sooner than they are and disseminating their wisdom out into the world. But so two challenges: one, the shrinking humanities, and two, meeting the urgency of the real world situation right now.
Yeah, and you present two significant challenges. Let me address the humanities one. I think the short answer is yes, I agree with you. And I agree with everything you said, not just that it is shrinking, but also that it is critical to this approach that I just talked about, right? And so this approach, I hope, empowers the recognition of the value of humanities, okay? And I think it's beginning to change. Google has been recently announced hiring a large number of philosophers into their tech company. But part of what we do at Colby is evangelize that, right, and use examples. At Colby, there's a philosophy professor who works with the performing arts to look at dance, and he uses AI 3D models for the philosophy of learning dance, right? And I told him, you're the poster child of why I'm here, right? So that's a great example of how we can hopefully get a broader perspective on the value of the humanities, right? And we do a lot of that with all of the departments, art departments. We do that with the English department. The English department has probably been one of our biggest, both from a faculty perspective, well, more from a faculty perspective, actually, of working with Davis AI and Davis AI tools. And so really great question on the humanities side. How do we speed things along, I think, was really your second question, because there is a sense of urgency. And I think that the sense of urgency is make sure that the graduates that we're graduating today have that full spectrum approach. Okay? I think it's less, like I've heard of people who are shortening degree cycles to 3 years, right, for example, to help that problem. I think it's dangerous to simply shorten it, but I do think if you can address and say we're shortening it in a way that people still have, I think there's a challenge for people to get that in the 4 years they're there today. And so it can't just be time, right? It has to be, how do we approach it in a way that enables our graduates? And by the way, if we can do it in 1 year, great, okay? But I think one of the challenges for what you were talking about, how do you build that critical thinking? And I was just talking to Gail on the way over from the ferry about friction, right? And how do you build friction? And students having the patience to go through friction, right? In the world we live in today, where I think a lot of them are losing that patience, right? How do we ensure that we're building that? And it takes time to do. So I didn't answer your question with a clear answer, here's how we solve the urgency problem, but maybe again, probably this is what I'm doing with all of you, I think, is adding in a caution for trying to get to an easy answer, right? Are we out of time?
Actually, we're at time now. I'm sure David will be available if he doesn't start his swim back. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.